My name is Katrina Walser, and if we haven't met before, I am a knitting teacher and designer based in Sydney in Australia, and you can find me online as Oliphant Cat. And welcome to my monthly podcast on the needles. So, before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So it is December 2021, and so this is probably going to be the last podcast of the year, and I mostly have a bunch of Christmas stuff to show you. So it's officially summer here in Australia. I found it really odd when I moved to the States to realise that a lot of people over there count their seasons from equinox to equinox, which happens around the 20th or the 21st of the month. But in Australia, we start our seasons officially at the start of the month. So, it's summer. It's a really weird summer. There is a La Nina event, weather front. I don't actually know what El Ninos and La Ninas are actually called, but it's been really strange and wet and cold here for summer. But it does mean that we get to wear our knits more. So I guess the first thing I should go over is what I'm wearing. This is my Waikiro top, which is a pattern by Aroha Knits, and I knit it. I had already moved back here, so I knit it sometime probably in early 2020. And it's been really lovely to have. It's a nice top for this sort of weather in the sort of in-between seasons, so spring and autumn, because it is knit in wool. So I think this was in Shashamaya sock, which is some sort of wool nylon blend. And it is 4-ply, so it's quite lightweight, but it's a nice, just sort of easy, summery top. So, the first section I have for you today, as always, is on the needles, which are all of my FOs and whips. Alright, I don't have a lot to show you, and I will explain why. This is why. I need to bundle this up a little bit because I'm not allowed to actually show it to you. So, I may have mentioned this before, but part of my hesitation with starting a podcast was that as a knitwear designer, there are some things that I make that I can't show people for months and months and months, because the lead time between writing a pattern and actually having it published, especially in books and magazines and things, is quite long. So I have this bundle of knitwear, and that's basically all I can show you. It took me maybe 2 or 3 weeks, quite a bit of the month. It is an FO. It has been blocked and seamed and everything. And for context, it was knit on 2.75 and 3.25 millimeter needles, which I think is a US 2 and 3, maybe a 1 and 2. And it is fingering off for 4-ply, so it was a pretty big job. It is also the most complicated pattern I have ever written by far. So the actual knitting process in those sort of cases is extended out quite a bit, because you're both knitting and figuring out the pattern as you go. So thankfully there wasn't a lot of frogging with this one, because I did plan it out quite a bit before I actually started knitting. There was a bit of frogging of swatches and some needle size experiments, but not a lot of frogging of the actual piece. So that was good at least. But it was so complicated. And I'm excited to tell you more about it. I will tell you all about it when I'm allowed to. But I don't think that's until May or June next year. So that is my reason why I don't have a lot to talk about this month, because this is what I spent most of my time on. One thing that I am allowed to tell you, I think, that's sort of amusing, is that it's made from 100% alpaca, which if you saw my last video about, mohair. It's a little funny because I was talking about how I don't like fuzz, but it is what it is. I ordered the yarn without actually thinking about what alpaca's like. And so it rocked up, it was very fuzzy, and it's fine. I actually really like it. It works really nicely with the pattern, so that's fine. But it was just sort of funny as I was knitting it. I was like, oof, here I was saying that I don't like fuzzy yarn, and I have a whole large piece of it. So I will definitely show you more about this in May or June, but until then, I can't really tell you much about it. So the other things that I have, okay, the one other FO I have is my Christmas stocking. Ta-da! So you guys saw this last month. I think last month I was up to about here-ish maybe on just the triangle bit. So this pattern is called the Triangle and Reindeer Stockings by, I think, Jenny Williams. It's called Triangle and Reindeer because it's actually a pattern for two separate stockings. So obviously I did the triangle one. The reindeer one is a more complicated traditional color work one. But I really like it. I really like how sort of modern the design looks. And I put a lot of work into this. So I will actually talk through a lot of the different bits and pieces in the context of my current whip. So this is the second one that I'm making. And I am making them for my nieces. So my sister asked for one in shades of green and one in shades of red. Ooh, that's going to make some clicking noises. Also, I forgot to say, if there's any random clunking in the background, I'm really sorry. I didn't really think it through and I started the washing machine just before I was about to record. So, apologies in advance. Okay, so I did a lot of work in this and I learned some things that I picked up and actually sort of did instead in this. So I'll talk through them together. So I'm really proud of how much work I did for this stocking. I'm not super happy with how I feel like there's a distinction between handmade and homemade. And I feel like this looks a little more homemade than handmade. So it's a little more lumpy than I'd like, and the colours are interesting. I actually do like the colours in this one better than the ones in this, which I'll talk about in a sec. But like, I think overall it looks quite nice, actually. I think I'm just being a little hard on myself, but it's just a little lumpy. I think my colour work might need some work. So the way you knit this, I knit it mostly to pattern. So you do a provisional cast on, and then you do a colour work chart just in a tube, which you can sort of see here. You put a line in for an afterthought heel, and then you finish it off with an I-cord edge, and then you put the afterthought heel and the toe in. So with the afterthought heel, you just cut through the line that you put in, and you sort of knit it in the round. And then the toe is actually exactly the same. It's just that you pick up the provisional cast on that you started with, and you go to there. So the one thing that complicated this whole process is that I decided to put some lining in it. So here it is. I cracked out my sewing machine for the first time since I put it away back in like June or July. So I thought it would be cute if I made the inside of this one red and the inside of this one green. So I do have the green material picked out for the red stocking as well. So I had this whole complicated process in mind for how I was going to put the lining in. I was going to sew it into the stocking with the wrong sides out and then like flip it inside out. And because of that, I was going to put the toe on at the end after I'd sewn the lining in. But I was talking to my friend, shout out to Lisa, if you haven't seen I always get this wrong. If you haven't seen 1121 Windmills on Instagram, definitely go check her out. And she knows a lot more about sewing than me. So she said that because it's just a stocking anyway, and you're never going to see the wrong sides, she suggested just finishing the whole stocking and then making the lining, cutting it out and sewing it into like a big sock shape, and then just shoving the whole thing in and hand stitching the top together. So that's what I did. I followed that process pretty much just how I described. So the only thing that I left out is that when you get to the top, you just sort of fold it over so that you get this like folded over edge. So the sort of raw edge of this red stocking is sort of folded down in between the material that you can see and the material of the stocking. So I did that whole process, and the other thing that I did too was that I didn't do the I-cord until after the lining was on. So I actually just bound off this green section at the top in this just like a regular bind off, and then I sewed the lining in, and then I picked up all the way around the green and knitted an I-cord edging, and that way it sort of hides the sewing that I did to sew the lining in, because that line of stitches is just sort of hidden in under here. So that whole process turned out really nicely. The other alterations that I made, the heel is a bit of a different size, so it was meant to be quite a bit smaller, but when I knitted in, it was a little too small. And so I extended it out a little bit. I made this line of decreases quite a bit longer. And the toe, I actually tried to make it the same size as the heel, but then it was too small. I mean, it was too big. It looked really strange. So I knit this almost basically to pattern. I think I might have done like one extra decrease by accident. The other thing with this stocking that was really confusing is that the needle sizes were all over the place. So I think what happened, because when I'm looking at it, it feels like this bottom foot part is quite a bit looser and wider than the leg section here. I think what happened is because I had so many whips last month, which I went over in the last podcast episode. I was moving needles everywhere, and I forgot to write down what size I started with. And I'm really annoyed at myself because I'm usually pretty good at either writing it down in the Ravelry notes or saying it in the podcast episode, or even just like sometimes I can identify which needle I was using based on an Instagram photo that I took. But nothing worked this time around. So I couldn't remember what size needle I actually used. So I think I may have accidentally gone a size down here in the top. So here are all the needle sizes I think I used. I think this section down here was a 4.5, and then from here up it was a 4. And then in the top part here, I went down 2 needle sizes because I know that my regular knitting is quite a bit looser than my color work. So I went down to maybe a 375 up here in this green section. And I did the 375 on the heel as well. And then I went to go do the toe, and so I was like, well, I think I did this in a 4.5, so I should go down to a 4. And it came out really strange looking, like the toe was just too small. So I ended up having to go all the way up to a 5mm to do the toe. So there are like 4 different needle sizes in this stocking, which I think sort of didn't contribute to it looking, well, I mean, I think that's what contributed to it looking sort of lumpy and a bit strange. So the last thing I wanted to tell you is, oh yes, the name. So this is the first time I've tried duplicate stitch. It was actually a little trickier than I thought. I knew how to do it in theory because duplicate stitch is actually how I weave all my ends in. But in practice, it turned out to be more challenging than I thought. You can just see the stitches a little bit more than I thought you would. Like you can see the green poking out behind the grey a little bit more than I thought. But that's okay. It looks pretty good from far away anyway. I did find a different alphabet to what was in the pattern. So I didn't love the alphabet that's provided in the pattern. It's very cursive and like ornate looking, and I was going for something a bit more modern with this. So I did a bit of Googling and found a cross-stitch font that I just adapted to use for the stocking, One thing I will say is that if you are looking for pixelated or cross-stitch sort of fonts, keep in mind that knitting stitches aren't square. They are thinner than they are tall. I think that's right. No, they're wider than they are tall. And so I actually ended up having to take a couple of stitches out of each of the letters because if you did it as given, they were quite wide. So I made all the letters maybe like a stitch or two smaller than they were in the suggestions. So yeah, so after figuring all that out, I've decided a couple of different things for this one. So I don't see why the toe is knit on at the end. So I just started with a cast on, a Judy's Magic cast on, and I did a toe up sock. So it's just a standard knit one, make one, knit to the end, make one, knit one, twice. If you don't know how to do a toe up sock, I'll put exactly what I did in my Ravelry project. And then I'm doing the tube up to here, and I put in the line for the Afterthought heel. So that's what this is here. One thing that I noticed with the Afterthought heel, and you'll be able to see it here. So in the pattern, and I'll pop a picture of the pattern up here, it's a bit odd because there is a line of this, like a solid line of this dark color underneath the heel, which I didn't love. In retrospect, I sort of see why she did it like that, because cutting in, like putting in the line for an Afterthought heel into color work is a little bit finicky. So if you look here, it's like, oh, it's more obvious on this side. So there's little like light green pips running across the top here. That's actually, I think, because of the way you pick up the Afterthought heel. It just doesn't work so nicely with floats. You just end up being able to see the floats a little bit from the front. So what I ended up doing, I didn't do the extra line of color at the bottom, but for this section here at the top, above the heel, I actually did a solid row of the dark red, where if you look over this side, it's really subtle, but this light red goes all the way down to the bottom of this row. But if you look really closely here, there's like a single dark red stitch sitting underneath the light red on this side. So essentially what I did for all of the triangles that are above the Afterthought heel line, I made them like one row smaller, which you really can't tell. So I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. So I'm hoping that stops it from having the floats in the heel. There was a little bit more adjusting that I had to do to make that work, because the start of the round is actually here. So if you had started the round and then did color work up to this bit and then tried to do the dark red all the way around, you still would have had floats all the way through. So because I was changing colors anyway, I actually started the round for this bit here in the middle, just above the Afterthought heel, and I did the like dark red color. And then I came around to the middle part where the Afterthought heel line ends, and I started the color work from there. And then I just did rounds going up from that way. So there's sort of like an extra half a round in there somewhere, I think. Anyway, so it was a little bit fiddly, and I'll try and write out the exact instructions that I did for it in my Ravelry project as well. So yeah. So this is all Bendigo Wool & Mills 8-ply. It's a mix of luxury and classic. And there is one colour of Lincraft Cozy Wool, which is this dark red down here. So essentially what happened is that I was picking colours and I had the BWM shade cards, and it turns out that I had an outdated shade card, so some of the colours that I picked weren't in stock anymore, and some of the colours that were on the site weren't actually on my shade card. So I had to YOLO pick a couple of different colours, and when I got them, there's more variety of greens in the BWM wool and less reds. So I had to sort of dip into some strange-ish colours. So this like pinky red here is a little bit more pink than I expected. And this like really bright fire engine-y red is also quite a bit brighter than I expected to. So I feel like it looks really cohesive and coherent up until this point, and then all of a sudden you go into some strange sort of really dark mixes, which again is probably my fault. I think I planned my colours out a little differently to what I should have, but that's okay. I think overall it looks good. Probably just being a little overly harsh. I think if I was going to plan it out again, I'd sort of mix this dark neutral in further down here and have this light grey up here. So you weren't getting really dark bits and really light bits like in sections. It was more sort of interspersed through. But in general, it's looking pretty good. I'm going to stick to one needle size the whole way through. So this I am knitting on a 4mm, and I'm just going to do the whole thing in the 4s. But I will make the heel bigger than it was written in the pattern, so I'll stick to the same heel as I did here. It also did look much better after I blocked it, this green one. So I'm looking forward to seeing this after it's blocked. It's really funny, so I've realized for myself that I definitely procrastinate more on pieces that I'm unsure of how they're going to turn out. So this stocking ended up taking a really long time. I think probably about a month. I think I cast it on sort of in the middle of October, and I didn't finish until 2 or 3 days ago. And I mean, to be fair, a large part of the pause, or like a large part of why it took so long, was because I paused to make the other piece that I was talking about. But I was also dragging my feet on it a bit because I just wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, and I wasn't sure if I was liking it and stuff. But now that it's finished, and I am actually quite proud of it, this has gone so much more quickly because I know that it's going to turn out fine. So I cast this on. Today is the 3rd. I think I cast this on in the nighttime of December 1st. And I'm already up to the second last row. I only have one more row of triangles. And then I do the rest of the work, and then I'll be done. So, yeah. I was worried that I wouldn't get it done before Christmas, but I actually have a 3rd one to do for my own daughter. And yeah, I was like, oh no, I'm not going to get them all done for Christmas, but given how quickly this has gone now, I think hers will be fine. So hers is going to be a mix of red and green. So yeah, that's probably more detail about Christmas stockings than you ever wanted to know. But if you are looking to make some, they are a lot of fun. And it's giant. Look how big this thing is. Pip's going to have a lot of stocking stuffers to try and fill this thing up. So my last whip that I have actually been working on very, very slowly is my Sizzle Pop. So I've shown this off last month, just briefly in case you missed it. This is sock yarn. I think it's 100% merino from By Corolla Down Under, and this is tweed sock from Fortune Yarn Co. This is Watermelon Toolmarine. And this one, I actually do have the label now, so I can tell you this time. This is Golden Wattle Flowers and Iron. So that's what she used to dye this. Okay, so Sizzle Pop is the most complicated brioche pattern I've ever worked on. To be fair, I haven't done that much brioche. But here she is. So it's a pattern by Leslie Ann Robinson. And it looks like this from this side, and the other side is like grey forward. So I really like how different it looks on either side, and it's looking so pretty. But I haven't made much progress at all. So I stuck this little progress keeper down here to show you where I was last time, like the last podcast episode. So I've done an extra repeat of the pattern, so that's good at least. I know last time I was saying that I was finding it quite complex, but it's getting better. I've gotten quite used to the decreases and increases now, so I'm not as married to the pattern because I'm not sitting there staring at the abbreviations, but I'm still finding it a little hard to read. I don't really know. I know how to do the decreases and increases, but I don't know where they go yet, because I normally find it quite easy to memorize patterns, but this one's still boggling my mind a little bit. So I do have to sit there staring at the chart every fourth row, but other than that, it's fine. So I'm getting there. I think I'll memorize it soon enough. But it's definitely taken a bit of a backseat because I need to get all that stuff done for Christmas. It's really funny. I never really understood what progress keepers were for, but I've realized it is quite handy for podcast episodes because now I can show you how much progress I've made since the last episode. So I will move this now. Sweet. And so there she is at the top, and next time I can show you how much progress I've made. Probably won't be much because I really do need to finish the stockings. So that's all my whips and FOs. Not a lot there. All of the yarn for all of the whips that I had last month has actually arrived, and so I do have plans to make all the baby blankets and things, but they just sort of need to go on hold at the moment because I want to get my Christmas stuff done. So hopefully I'll have some of those to show you next month instead. Okay, so the next section we have is Off the Needles, which is other stuff that I just feel like talking about, sometimes knitting related, sometimes not. So the first thing that is totally not knitting related is that I put my Christmas decorations up, which always makes me really happy. Well, I've got like half of them up. We're going to go shopping for a tree on the weekend because we usually get a real tree. And yeah, because I normally decorate on the first day of Advent, which in the church calendar is actually 4 Sundays before Christmas. So it varies based on when that Sunday is. So this year it was on the 28th of November. So I started putting my decorations up then, which was really exciting. And yeah, I've got quite a few of them up, but I need to do a little bit more work. And maybe when they're done, I can take some photos or something and put them in my Instagram stories. So that's always fun. I really love Christmas. It's my favorite time of year. The other thing is that I didn't have any patterns that came out this month, actually. So I don't know when my next pattern release is going to be. But speaking of pattern releases, thank you so much to everyone who entered the giveaway for oh my gosh, I still can't pronounce it. Tetrominos. As a reminder, it was my free pattern that I released in October, and so I'll pop a link to it down below and put a picture of it here. And I have one ball of the yarn, of the multicolored yarn to give away, which is Chroma worsted from Knit Picks. So thank you to everyone who joined the giveaway. I was actually really surprised at how many of you do play video games. So it's nice to know that I'm not alone in my strange knitting and video game hobby crossover. And shout out to all of my cross stitches, because I asked people to tell me what else you do other than knitting if you don't play video games. And yeah, there are quite a few people who do cross stitch. So that was my main non-knitting crafty hobby for a really long time. So I haven't done it for a bit, but I'm glad there's a lot of you out there, because I feel like cross stitch is satisfying in the same way knitting is, because it's very precise. You just like follow a pattern. So I can see why there's a lot of crossover. So all that being said, I popped everyone's names in this yarn bowl, and I will pick a name out of the bowl. Ta-da! Let's do this one. Alright, so the winner of the Chroma worsted is Julia H. Thank you so much, Julia, for your comment. I will pop it up here on the screen. And please get in touch with me. My email address is down in the description box down below, or you can find me on Instagram at oliphantcat, and I will get your yarn shipped out to you. And for everyone else, if you would like to grab Tetrominos, it is a free pattern, and so there's a link to it down in the description box too. But thank you, everybody. It's really exciting when you guys like my patterns, because it's just a lot of fun writing them, and it's nice to see when people are quite enthusiastic about them. And this one's gotten a fun reception, I think, because it's just sort of fun as a pattern in general. I'm glad so many of you like Tetris. And the last thing that I wanted to mention this month is the Indie Design Gift Along, which I spoke about last month. But if you haven't seen the gal, it's a big make-along that happens at the end of every year, mostly as an effort to get people to finish off their Christmas knitting. So it is run on Ravelry, unfortunately, but a lot of the designers also have other shops that aren't on Ravelry. And aside from it being a make-along, it's also an encouragement for people to support indie designers. So I've put all of my patterns up for it, and they were on sale at the end of last month. So thank you to everybody who bought some. And now it's just sort of the main section of the gal where people just knit. It's got such an active forum on Ravelry. So Sizzle Pop is actually a pattern that qualifies for prizes and entries and things in the gal, but it turns out you were meant to cast on at the beginning of the gift along. It doesn't count if you cast on before then. So I don't know what I'm going to make for the gift along this year, if anything. One thing that I do want to try making is a set of Christmas tree ornaments, or at least one Christmas tree ornament. They're actually crochet ornaments, but I can't remember the designer's name, but I will pop all the pictures and the info and stuff up on the screen. So if you'd like to participate, it is a lot of fun. People chat so much. It's got such an active forum. And if you can't actually use Ravelry, there is an alternative knit along that started off maybe 2 years ago in response to Ravelry's accessibility problems. I think it's called the Fasten Off Cal, something like that. So I'll pop the info for that down below too, if you want to participate in something similar that isn't run on Ravelry. Okay, the next section I have for you is from the community, which is where I talk about projects people have made for my patterns. So I have quite a few Southern Star blankets to show you today. So Southern Star is a baby blanket pattern that I wrote in 2019, and it's like a lace sampler blanket, and I really love it. It looks really pretty. But my friend Raina, who actually started as an intern on my team back in my old job a few years ago, it turned out that she was a knitter, and right around when I was writing the pattern was when we were talking a lot about knitting, and so she ended up test knitting the Southern Star blanket for me. So she did it originally in one of the Autumn and Indigo kits that was released for the pattern. And then she did a really great job, and it was super pretty. And I thought that was that. But then the other day she messaged me, and it turns out that she's made 6 of these blankets all up, which is really encouraging. She made 6 of them. And like, I don't know, just when people like a pattern so much they make multiple of them. I said this last month, but it just always makes me really, really happy. And so she's getting married, which is lovely, and so she made them as presents for her bridesmaids, and she made a jumbo one that fits a king-size bed, and I do not know how she did it. Like, looking at the pattern pictures, it looks like she just did each of the sections with like extra repeats, but the thing that blows my mind is that it's a center out blanket, so I have no idea how many stitches she had on her needles in the last round, and like, I'm assuming she had to shove a bunch of interchangeable needle cables together to get the whole thing to work. So I can't imagine binding that off at the end. Like, she says it fits a king-size bed, so yeah, I don't know, I'm just really happy that she likes the pattern so much, and all of her pictures look beautiful. She said she did the bridesmaids ones in her wedding colours, so they're all very coherent. There's a very coherent sort of colour palette with them. So they just look really nice. So thank you, Raina. I'm glad you like the pattern so much. And if anyone is looking for Southern Star, it is a pattern up on Ravelry and Etsy, and I'll put links to it down below too. So the last section is called Coming Up, and this is just what I've got going on for the next month. So to be honest, I'm a little bit burnt out from writing the pattern for the alpaca FO that I showed you. It was just a lot of work and I was working some sort of silly long hours. Basically, I didn't give myself enough time to write the pattern. So I'm trying to figure out how to take a little bit of a step back in December, especially with Christmas and the holidays and everything. I just want to sort of slow down. I do have a pattern that's due sometime this month, but it's a lot more simple than that. So I'm hoping I can just sort of get that done and send it off and be able to wind down in the next sort of couple of weeks, especially before Christmas. But what I do want to spend this month doing is doing a bit of planning for next year. And yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where to focus my time and energy. I think next year I want to focus a lot on tech editing and pattern writing for third parties. So I've basically decided that I'm not going to publish patterns for myself anymore. There's just a lot of extra logistics that go into writing patterns and the writing is fine. It's the publishing patterns for yourself that takes a lot of effort because I'm not very good at doing marketing, I don't think. And so just getting it out there and getting people to buy it and knit it and see it. It's just a lot of work that I don't love doing. And so that's why I like publishing with third parties, because you just write the pattern and they do all of that stuff for you. So I'd like to spend more time publishing things with third-party patterns. I'd like to spend more time publishing third-party patterns. And then the other thing is that I haven't talked a lot about tech editing here, but basically it's where you proofread and edit other designers' patterns. And I've been having a lot of fun with that. I think that it is sort of scratching my teaching itch because I actually get to sort of not just correct and edit people's patterns, but also work with them on their designs, and a lot of them are sort of newer designers, and so it's been really nice to share a lot of the knowledge that I've gathered over the last 5 years and help them out with that. And if you're curious to learn more about tech editing or like what it is I'm even talking about, I actually did an interview with Sarah and Christina from Tech Edit Tips, I think is the name of their YouTube channel. And so I'll pop a link to that down below. It was just a really fun chat about designing and tech editing and things like that. And so had a lot of fun chatting to them about it. So if you're curious to learn more about tech editing, then you can go watch that too. So that's actually an interesting segue into what I wanted to ask you all about. So I am trying to figure out what I want to do with YouTube next year. I know I mentioned this a little bit last month. But I do definitely want to keep doing the podcast. I was really looking forward to sitting down and chatting with you all today in a way that I just haven't been excited about my YouTube videos recently. So I'm really glad that I have this sort of space to chat to you guys about my knitting. And this is going to be the last episode for the year, but I will have one more video before the end of the year. It'll be some sort of year-end wrap-up. I don't know if I'm going to walk through everything I've knit this year or talk more about the design side of things, but that is actually what I wanted to ask you all about. I've been doing this for about 6 months now, and I've tried a lot of different types of videos. There have been vlog style videos, there have been really heavy teaching videos like the one where I talked about yarn substitution and yarn weights. And then there have been like random things like, the vlog style ones. So like the one with my like room cleanup. And then there have been other tutorials and things. And so I was throwing a lot of stuff against the wall this year just to figure out where I wanted to land with my channel. And I'm actually also quite interested in making videos about designing, not just about knitting, because I feel like there aren't a lot of videos about knitting design and knitting businesses and stuff. And so I just wanted to check in with all of you as I plan out my stuff for next year. What is it that you've all been liking? Because there are quite a few of you now. I'm so glad that there are so many of you who are just following along. And like, I'm really excited about building a community of just people who want to talk about knitting. And yeah, I just like, it's gone to the point where I know your names and I know what you've been making, and like you're just sort of commenting really consistently on my videos and stuff. And so it's been so lovely getting to know you all. And so I just wanted to put it out there and see what you guys want, because I don't really know, beyond staring at my YouTube analytics, I don't really know what it is that you find exciting or interesting to watch. So if you could drop a comment down below and let me know what it is that you'd be interested in seeing, that would be really helpful for me to plan out next year. So I think that's basically it. I hope you all have a wonderful December and Christmas and New Year's, or whatever it is you do for your year-end wrap-up. If you could do me a favor and pop a like on this video, that helps people find it. And if you haven't subscribed yet and you're interested in following along, then you can subscribe using this button right here. And if you're looking for previous podcast episodes, there's a whole playlist of them up here. And until next time, happy knitting!